Yo, what's going on guys, Arekkz here, welcome back to another Destiny 2 video, and in today's video I want to speak to you guys some more about the Arcstrider subclass for the Hunter. Since E3 is now finished, I finally had a chance to actually go hands-on with the brand new subclass, and as I mentioned the other day, while I wasn't able to direct record some gameplay, I do have some B-roll which you guys would have seen already, and of course there was also the description of the skill tree from a Game Informer article. However, one thing we were able to do at E3 is if you were playing, you were able to record some off-screen gameplay over the shoulder. Only a couple of minutes, so I'm going to show you guys a couple of short snippets of the super being used. This is TwoSixNine playing, so he got a good chance to really use the super quite well, take out most of the team, and show you just what it can do. And at the same time, we were also able to take an in-depth look at the skill tree. So while we've spoken about some of this stuff already, I do want to recap it now we've actually got some reference points to actually look at. So in this video, we're going to take an in-depth look at that skill tree and also talk a little bit more about the Arcstrider in action, show you some of the kind of off-screen shots that we have, and also just talk about how it feels to play it, compare it with, say, like the Blade Dancer, and just in general how this kind of like fares up with some of the other offerings that we have right now. So if you do enjoy this, then a like would be super appreciated. Comment down below if you have any questions, and of course, also let me know what you guys think. Maybe some of you were at E3 and you had a chance to try it yourself. Maybe some of you have just seen some gameplay and you've already got your own opinions. Either way, let me know in the comments down below. Now, to begin with, let's turn our attention to the skill tree. As mentioned, this follows the new format, the kind of simplified format. So at the epicenter of every skill tree, whether this be Dawnblade, the revised Gunslinger, Striker, Sentinel, etc., they will always have the super right at the epicenter, and in this instance, that is of course the Arc Staff. Now do of course bear in mind at this stage things are still subject to change, so descriptions, actual abilities and things like that, they're not necessarily 100% locked, but as it currently stands, this is the Arcstrider we had a chance to play with. So of course L1 and R1 activates your Arc Staff super, and you can then use R1 plus different sort of directions in combat to move yourself around whilst you're wielding this Arc Staff. But we'll speak a little bit more about gameplay at the latter part of this video. Of course, moving up from the top there, we have the grenades. So these are the three that are available for this class. You of course have the Skip Grenade, which is a grenade that splits upon impact and it creates multiple projectiles which seek out enemies. You also have the Flux Grenade, which is an explosive grenade that deals additional damage when attached to the enemies. And of course you have the kind of signature Arc Bolt Grenade, which is the one that changes bolts of lightning to nearby enemies. So if you've played Blade Dancer before, you'll be very familiar with these. Of course, going over to the left, as I've said before, these are class abilities, not subclass abilities, so these will be present in every single subclass for the Hunter. Marksman's Dodge is your ability to reload your weapon when you dodge, so instead of kind of having the usual sort of shade step animation, you have this sort of twirl instead. And upon doing that, the weapon you have equipped is reloaded, so it's very, very useful. Of course, there is a bigger cooldown on the dodges now, so you can't necessarily spam it as much as you could with shade step in the past, but it is still very useful. Of course, conversely, you do have Gambler's Dodge, so this one is more focused if you want to melee attack, and this is definitely going to be especially useful in this particular subclass when we speak more about the Way of the Warrior. But Gambler's Dodge, when you dodge near an enemy, you generate melee energy. Of course, down at the bottom you have your jumps. You have your traditional high jump, it upgrades your double jump with even greater height. You have your strafe jump to give you better directional control whilst in the air, and you also have your triple jump, which upgrades your double jump with a third jump. But of course, going on from there, we then have the two different paths. You have Way of the Warrior and Way of the Wind. Way of the Wind is much more focused on speed and agility. It's much more focused on sort of constantly moving whilst playing. So you have Disorienting Blow, where striking an enemy with this debilitating melee attack disorients the target. Killing a target with a disorienting blow instantly recharges the ability. On top of that, you also have Lightning Reflexes, so you take less damage whilst dodging when Arc Staff is active. You have Battle Meditation, where when critically wounded, melee and grenades recharge drastically faster. And finally you have Focused Breathing, where sprinting reduces your dodge cooldown and increases your maximum sprint speed. So again, to kind of reiterate that, you of course want to keep moving, because when you're moving you can recharge your dodge, and you can of course then use your dodge to benefit you depending on how you have it spec'd out. So that is Way of the Wind, much more focused on movement. Way of the Warrior, however, is the one that is much more focused on melee attacks, which is why I said you might want to consider using Gambler's Dodge. You have the ability Combat Flow, where melee kills recharge your dodge skill. You have Deadly Reach, where dodging temporarily increases your melee range. You have Lethal Current, where the Arc Staff attack hits twice after dodging. And you have Shocking Blow, where striking an enemy with this powerful melee attack emits a deadly bolt of lightning from your fist. So that's really useful, because if we jump over to the B-roll that Activision provided, this is an example of what the melee attack for the Hunter looks like now, because instead of having the typical dagger we've had, up until this point in Destiny 1, we now have a more bog standard melee punch, and of course that will then lend itself nicely to this new ability, Shocking Blow, where you can of course get a small kind of arc lightning burst out your fist to slightly extend the range. So this top path where the warrior is much more melee focused, and again if you pair that with Gambler's Dodge to the point where you then dodge to recharge your melee abilities, you land melee kills to recharge your dodge abilities, then of course you have the potential for this almost infinite circle. Of course you can't necessarily one-hit everything with a melee attack, but if you were to try and sort of, work some gunshots into there and just make sure you finish with a melee attack, then you can definitely get a lot of mileage out of this. So this is the one that was set up for us to use at the event. We weren't able to swap to the other one because of course they need some sort of resource, some kind of currency item to unlock them. So everyone that's playing at E3 was playing as the kind of Way of the Warrior path. So now with that out of the way, let's turn our attention to the actual gameplay itself. Speaking about the Arcstrider, this is honestly a really, really awesome super. I've always been a fan of Blade Dancer. It's probably my second favourite Hunter subclass, shortly after Night Stalker, but I do really like Blade Dancer. However, when you compare these side by side, Arcstrider is definitely a lot more precise, a lot more deliberate. If you look back to, say, Blade Dancer, while you can still be somewhat precise with it, let's be honest, there is a certain element of almost button bashing with it. Effectively, you activate your super, you spam it, and you kind of hope that as you're swinging your blades forward, you lock onto an enemy, you kill them, and it's a little bit harder to actually be specifically accurate in the way that you move. Arcstrider, on the other hand, this is where it comes into its own, because of course with the staff, if you just sit there and spam the buttons, you are effectively going to kind of spin around where you are, and you're actually going to kind of leave yourself a little bit open. As I said before, supers are a lot more balanced this time around to the point where they are still devastating, and if you get caught in them, you're probably going to die. But there is of course also still scope to take out people using supers if they don't use them effectively. So you're definitely not just going to want to activate it and just start spamming R1 in the hope of killing everyone in the vicinity, because you are still going to need to use this to your advantage. You can move a lot better with Arcstrider as well. You can move a lot more precise, so you can run forward, and of course you can press R1 to flip forward towards the enemies. And of course, because you are wielding a staff while you flip, this isn't just a dodge, this is actually an attack. So you can effectively just, dodge into enemies and kill them in the process, which is really, really useful. But also, conversely, you can use this in the opposite direction. So if you were to come around the corner, you kill an enemy, and the other enemy was like at the opposite end of the corridor, and it wasn't, say, strategically advantageous to engage, you would just typically die because by the time you got there, they would have shot you. Then you can instead go backwards, you can flip backwards, so you can use this in kind of multiple directions to effectively control where you go on the battlefield. You can still use it standing still if you, say, you're in a group of enemies, maybe you're playing PvE and like you're getting swarmed by enemies, then you can still use it there. But if you jump up, you can then use it a lot more like a Fist of Havoc. The radius, when you jump up, you basically do this big slam where you slam your staff down on the ground, and you have a radius that is very similar to Fist of Havoc. So while Blade Dancer in the past had something similar to that, when you could of course spin around in a circle and you had this sort of arc wave that came out, this is definitely going to be a lot more useful because, of course, if you kind of factor it into, say, a PvP game, say you're playing Countdown and you see the enemies on the point, you could then jump up over the top of them, use your motion to cover some ground, and then jump up and slam down to effectively take out the enemies around a point. And again, PvE, if there are some trash mobs grouping up, it'll be a great way to clear out enemies. One thing I do still want to test out, I didn't get a chance to test it out extensively at E3 because, of course, time was limited, but that is to find out how effective melee supers are in boss situations, because if you play Destiny 1, you will know that any sort of melee attacks on bosses is, let's be honest, a bit of a waste of time and frankly a suicide run. You might go in and get one hit, but it doesn't do enough damage, and invariably almost every enemy has some kind of stomp attack that'll just shut you down there and then. So the mobility of Arcstrider definitely lends itself to the potential to jump in, do some damage and get out. However, until I actually get a chance to test it out extensively in PvE situations, I won't know that for sure. So I'm guessing the next chance I'll get an option to test that out will be the beta, dropping next month. So when that does happen, I will definitely be testing that out extensively because I really, really would like it if melee focused supers did have some utility in boss fights, because if you are trying to sort of, help out your team and you do have this super, while you're going to be useful for clearing, say, trash mobs and whatnot, it would be nice to make sure you can also have some utility in boss fights, especially when you think you've got someone like Dawnblade who can rain fiery blast from afar, and of course you'll have the Sentinel who can throw a shield. It would be quite nice to be able to do something similar as the Arcstrider. However, for the time being, that is pretty much it on the actual subclass itself. In terms of actually how it feels, I really, really enjoyed this. I mean, I appreciate the moment, the only kind of other thing I've had a chance to try out is the revised Gunslinger. So sort of new, fancy Arcstrider subclass compared to a slightly updated Gunslinger is always going to be considerably more exciting, but it does feel really good. It feels a lot more controlled. I feel like I have a lot more precision with it. I feel like I'm actually in control of the super. I don't feel like I'm sort of in the passenger seat just waiting for the super to kind of finish and just deal some damage. I feel like I'm actually fully in control, and I've always been a fan of bow staffs anyway. As someone that plays as like Wukong in League of Legends and like other games, then I can effectively be Wukong in Destiny 2. So I am completely down with that, but for my time playing it, I really enjoyed it. Of course, that was only kind of a few limited matches, but once the base does drop next month, we do know that they will be including Dawnblade, Sentinel, and Arcstrider. So we'll all have a chance to test out all the new subclasses. So that is something to look forward to. But until then, be sure to let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. And if you did enjoy the video, a like would be super appreciated. And stay tuned, I've got much more Destiny 2 coverage coming your way. There is loads of information that dropped last week from interviews and stuff that I've just got to catch up on. It was an incredibly busy week. I was out there covering Destiny and loads of other games. If you guys saw some of the videos, then thank you for all the support. But of course, as I'm sure you can imagine, trying to juggle all that at the same time, it's quite hard to stay up to date on absolutely everything. So expect some more Destiny videos coming next week. But for the time being, thank you for watching, take it easy, catch you next time, peace out.